Welcome, everybody. Thanks for joining. I will go ahead and give about a minute for folks to join webinar here before we get kicked off. So just stand by for 1 minute. Go ahead and introduce yourself in the chat. Say hi to your fellow webinar goers here. Love to see where everybody's calling in from. All righty, we'll go ahead and kick off. Just before we get going, a couple of housekeeping notes. This webinar is being recorded, so we will send out the recording afterwards, so you'll get a chance to review it again. And as we go through, feel free to ask questions either in the Q&A section or in the chat. One of us will be monitoring throughout the call, and then also we will come to a Q&A section at the end where we'll be able to answer any questions that we don't get to during the webinar itself. So with that said, welcome to today's webinar on AI agents. Specifically, we're going to be exploring some of the specific challenges we're seeing companies run into as they're trying to develop and deploy AI agents, and want to lean into and talk about how Dataiku approaches solving these challenges to help folks ultimately drive real value, like move beyond the hype and drive real value with agents. So real quickly, I want to present myself and Kurt. Kurt has been with Dataiku for more than 10 years, was previously Dataiku's Chief Customer Officer, and now is our Head of AI Strategy. Thank you, Kurt, for being with us today. And then I'm Christian. I lead content and product marketing here at Dataiku. I'm passionate about data science and Gen AI, so I'm just glad to be here. Before we get going, I think it's really useful for us as speakers, but also for other attendees here on the webinar to learn a little bit about where people are at in their AI agent journey. So if you wouldn't mind contributing, I will open up a poll here. Two quick questions I wanted to ask, and I'll share my screen. One of them is, what's the state of agents in your organization? So are y'all kind of brainstorming ideas and use cases? Are you potentially actively building agents, or maybe do you already have some that are deployed and running today, doing, helping with automation and workflows and things like that? And I'll leave this open for a few seconds for folks to contribute. We can see where everybody's at in their journey. Awesome. Yeah, it's interesting to see these results here. We asked a similar question about 2 months ago, and so this is a chance for us to see how things have progressed in that time. I think at that time we probably saw about 7% of folks who had agents deployed. So we can see that numbers growing. People are actively making progress on this. That's great, but there's obviously still a lot of room for us to get to the finish line on agents. Okay, cool. Thank you for sharing on that. I'm going to ask one more question that I think will be useful for us and for y'all, which is, as you're moving towards that deployment, as you're moving towards deploying AI agents into production, what are some of the challenges you're running into, if you have run into any of these challenges already today? And if it's other, would love to hear in the chat, because there's probably a lot of interesting roadblocks that people have hit as they've deployed some of these. Awesome, great. So connecting to the right data and systems is far and away the biggest challenge, but obviously we see a pretty good spread here. And this is good because all of these topics are going to be things that we're going to touch on today. The connection and integration is definitely a big one that we like to talk about. All right, I'll close that. Thank you for contributing the answers there. It's pretty cool to see where your fellow developers and other companies are at with regards to AI agents. Kurt, I will let you pull up your slides, and we can start talking about AI agents with Dataiku.
That's great. Thank you so much, Christian. And well, Christian, you mentioned that you're just happy to be here. Well, I'm just happy to have you here with me on this webinar. So let's kick things off, and let me start with something blindingly obvious, right? AI agents are everywhere. You don't need to be a total tech junkie to know that agents are essentially the main topic of conversation now. Everything about generative AI, about the chatbots, we've now fully transitioned over to agents, right? And at the same time, we have a lot of noise in the ecosystem. And when I'm out talking to Dataiku's clients and future clients, some of whom I see here on the call, so recognize some names. So it's great to have you all here. We hear that confusion. A lot of that confusion is just definitional, right? Is this an agent, or is that an agent, or maybe something else? What does it mean for me to have an agent? We can touch on some of those points, but really, I think that we don't want to get bogged down in the semantics and the specifics of a definition, which is mostly about drawing a firm line saying that once you get to this degree of autonomy, then you are an agent, and without that degree of autonomy, you are just a mere RAG chatbot. Because in the end, this is going to be a spectrum of capabilities as these systems get built out. But I think what we can do is we can also simplify this landscape a little bit, given that we see the agents that are coming out in the market coming really from three main categories. So let's put those into those categories and think about some of their strengths and weaknesses. This also is going to serve into helping to understand how Dataiku positions ourselves within this broader space. Well, so first are the agentic capabilities from AI infrastructure providers. And when I say AI infrastructure providers, well, these are the hyperscalers, the clouds, but also the model developers themselves. So you have OpenAI and Anthropic, as well as, of course, the three additional clouds. You can imagine others in this category. It's not meant to be exhaustive. But generally speaking, what they're providing are a lot of the underlying foundational elements, the models themselves, the compute resources, the storage, the associated data storage, data lakes, data warehouses. And the benefit from this is really you can compose something which can be potentially quite powerful, right? But often this is a developer first building experience. Furthermore, right, these platforms don't always come out on top in terms of an integrated experience of monitoring all of the activity, maintaining multiple complex systems across that entire platform on which you've developed them. Now, at the other end of the spectrum, let's say, many of you are probably hearing from a lot of new startups. Some of these might be focused on a particular vertical, a particular line of business within your company, maybe focusing on developing agents for your HR function, for example. Or maybe they're just really coming out and saying that this is the easiest and quickest way to start building agents. I couldn't even get all the logos on this slide. There's a lot of them, right? Many of them of all shapes and sizes, different colors for the logos. It's really exciting to see that innovation. And now a lot of these platforms, a lot of these tools are going to be extremely convenient, right? But at the same time, that might be coming at a cost of governance, the ability to manage different agents developed across different tools, and also questions about the viability of that agent or even the company developing that platform for you. And then really there's one last and third very important category of agents. And those are all the agents and agent building capabilities within the enterprise applications that make up a lot of your enterprise IT stack, right? And so these are your HubSpots, your CRMs, your IT ticketing software with ServiceNow, your human capital management platforms like Workday, and many others, right? And these may not be the ones that you actually use, but I bet that whoever your CRM is, they're coming out and telling you about the agents that they're introducing. Now, this is great, right? They're connected to these enterprise systems where a lot of your activities, a lot of your business lives. But at the same time, that might be coming at an expense of some siloing between those different tools and the potential to extend or customize those agents to really meet your business needs. And so what we want to think about actually is agents in a slightly different way. And I want to zoom in and really focus on these enterprise applications. Because first, I think it's really important for us to think about what those enterprise applications are. If we go back 25 years, 30 years into the history of SaaS applications, right? What we have is essentially a database, a relational database most often, which then defines with some software to define the basic in and out actions, the transactions on top of that database, and then applying custom business rules on top of that, right? So in a way, right, the joke is all of these applications are just wrappers on databases. Sure, that's true, but they're adding a lot in terms of defining what those transactions are, managing those transactions, and then allowing you to define specific business rules, or of course, use the ones that come predefined in their platform. Well, now, right, they're all adding their AI assistants, agents to automate some of that process. But I think there is a real question, and what Dataiku we see as the future is a question of, is that model of these enterprise applications, is it still fit for purpose? And what we're hearing is that there's, concerns about cost, about silos between these different applications, and even the relevance of their structure to the way that the business actually operates, right? And in many ways, and this is something which is almost a truism. We've gotten to the point where we're essentially defining our organizations around the way these applications are structured, rather than, of course, starting from what our business needs, working back from that, and then having software which adapts to that. And so organizations have been looking for a new class of AI first applications, right? Imagining, right, what could a cross application assistant look like? Imagine, for example, an IT support engineer. They, in order to do their job, are probably jumping between a ticketing platform, a CRM, maybe other sources of data as well, to get a complete picture of who this customer is, what their technical issues are, and what the essentially the business stakes are in order to solve that. It's true, certainly within Dataiku. We know that, just looking at the usage logs of our applications between our technical support ticketing application users and our highest CRM users, it's a lot of overlap because those support engineers are constantly in the CRM looking up the data about that customer. Well, what if we could imagine a cross-application assistant that can traverse those boundaries, finding that information and automating part of those steps for that support engineer? Second, right, wouldn't it be great if we could have an AI extended data model? Imagine, for example, that we could have a system which is automatically augmenting and enriching supply chain data with a demand forecast being a predictive model, a traditional machine learning model, which is constantly coming up with new predictions for, the next week, the next month, the next quarter, the next year, so that supply chain data is always up to date without having to have a data scientist or a data engineer have to manually go and reconcile that data, combine it into a new report, and upload it to the dashboards or wherever it needs to live. What if that kind of intelligence could be automated? And then finally, right, imagine the way that a marketing specialist might have to create content that needs to go through legal review. They're going to be jumping back and forth between their creative platforms, between their legal management platform, in order to ensure that the process of coming up with the content, which they might be using generative AI for already, right, being able to submit it, lay it out, and then submit it for that review, all could be potentially automated if we had the ability to break the boundaries of those applications. Now, over the past years, right, the entire enterprise AI stack has essentially grown to meet that need as organizations yourselves have attempted to build similar capabilities to these, right? And the way that that works has been to develop a number of different categories for software, right? Everything where the data is stored, you see that down in that lower blue layer, introducing in there as well the large language models, all the ways to then work with that data, and then finally to manage all the different assets that you've built, such that you can produce all the analytics, models, and now agents that can enrich those existing enterprise applications. And so this has been, the work of a better part of a decade. We've called it enterprise AI. It's certainly a place where Dataiku has been playing. But ultimately, what we see is this has led to quite a bit of fragmentation and quite a bit of complexity in that stack. And so let's actually move. What I'm doing here right now, let me just go back to the previous slide, that lower blue layer of the data lakehouses, warehouses, data observability, large language models. That is a pretty stable part of the market. So we're going to go ahead and put that down with the rest of the infrastructure. That's now on the left, the data and AI infrastructure, right? And so what do we have now here at the top, where you have all of these different capabilities, all of which are focusing on producing analytics models and agents? Well, that very simply is the vision for the Dataiku Universal AI Platform, the Dataiku product, which some of you are familiar with, right? And ultimately, that vision is one that takes that data and AI infrastructure layer plus that enterprise application layer and lays over it, right? Multi-cloud, multi-platform, multi-model approach associated with an entire layer for achieving federated governance. So governance, which doesn't require you to centralize everything, but to have control over where your data is going, which models you're using, et cetera, so that you can enable enterprise-wide creation of those agents, models, and analytics. And when we say enterprise-wide creation, what do we mean? Well, of course, Dataiku is not designed to work only in one department or only for one type of user or one profile. Indeed, Dataiku is truly designed for all functions, ranging from the most technical. So on the left-hand side, right, we have our IT and data and AI teams, a variety of different profiles in there, most of whom are either doing administrative tasks, administering the platform, or who are doing, let's say, code first engineering of different capabilities of those agents, models, or analytics. But at the same time, Dataiku is also supporting and used by those analytics and BI teams, as well as the lines of business, right? Where you might have people whose title is not data something, but strategist or a domain expert of some type, right? Maybe this is a process engineer. Maybe it's a researcher of some type who, again, doesn't have data in their title, but who is a technically minded person and who can build then analytics, models, agents with the capabilities that Dataiku provides. And so today, of course, we're focusing on agents, right? And so it doesn't mean that we're forgetting the models and analytics. That's actually an important part of the story, but we're focusing on those agents because agents really do introduce a new type of intelligence to the enterprise. Just to put that on a spectrum and to put this into perspective with the history of all the different types of intelligence that have been built into the enterprise. Well, one, right, we have those analytics, right, which are a form of descriptive intelligence, backwards looking. We have the models, which are a form of forward looking predictive intelligence. And now we have the agents, which are a form of automated intelligence, where you can have them building out certain capabilities where the agent itself can have some degree of decision making or tool use to accomplish its task. And it's really those agents, to come back to it, which are enabling this new class of applications, right? This new class of applications, which breaks the boundaries between existing enterprise applications so that you can start designing these applications for your own purposes, rather than organizing your business around the structures of those enterprise apps themselves. Today, you can start building those flexible, modular, composable applications, which are built really with the agent at the core of it. So this is potentially quite transformative because there's potential for transformation at every level. If you just take the task of an individual who's currently using some of those enterprise applications, well, maybe instead of actually accessing the UI of that enterprise app, the ticketing support ticket platform, the CRM, the HR platform, maybe instead of actually interfacing with the UI, they're working directly with an agent instead. And so that becomes the enterprise application becomes a layer behind. That, though, might lead to a change in roles as well, right? Where we start seeing some of the machine-like tasks that we all do in our jobs every day, that those start to become automated. And what that might mean then is that there can be a new focus on judgment and creativity for the people, right? So letting the machines do the machine-like work so that the humans can focus on the uniquely human work, which can't be handed off to an LLM, no matter how capable it is or how high scoring it is on whichever benchmarks. And this, of course, if we're transforming roles, we're potentially transforming organizations. Because cross-department agents, right, which are going across these different platforms, they start to blur the borders of these departments, right? And we can start to rethink how our sales and marketing team work together, how our creative and legal teams work together. And this can lead to this de-siloing, not only of knowledge, but also of the work itself, as these agents start to augment these existing applications. In a sense, right, the applications take almost a step back in a sort of into an infrastructure layer with the agent working on top of it, adding this new, more flexible, more intelligent layer, which is ultimately going to accelerate and hopefully make it easier for everybody in the company to do their jobs. Now, it may mean that some jobs are going to change, and that's not always an easy thing. But as leaders in organizations, this is something that you should be thinking about. So that's all been very high level, right? So maybe maybe to bring it down to earth, let's tell a story, right? I'm a bit of a storyteller. You'll see that when we come back to the conclusion later. And so here we're going to tell the story of an imaginary company, and they set out on an AI agent transformation of their entire business. And not to spoil it, but they're going to get it wrong before they get it right. So this is a story of Barrow Realty Group, right? This is John Barrow, the founder of this real estate agency. They've got a number of different agencies in the New York area. Here we see him in front of his Queens agency, and John, he's not very happy. Things aren't going great for the business, but he's heard these cool things about AI agents, and he thinks that this might be a way for him to transform his business. And so not only does he think that this is a technical way for him to transform, well, he rebrands his entire company. And so now they are Re-AI Estate, because everyone who does anything with AI or agents now needs to make a pun that uses the letters AI. He's chosen to make one that looks like real estate, but which is read Re-AI. Very nice. And he's decided to rebrand and build agents. Now, this is John's big idea, but the good news is he has a pretty good technical team behind him. And so they get to work to start thinking about what they could do to build those agents, right? So they're going to start by building the real estate agent. So it's an agent to help their human real estate agents. And they come up with all sorts of great ideas. We could automate parts of scheduling the viewings of the different properties. And maybe we could automate the generation of neighborhood insights. Maybe we could connect it to some rental price estimation tool. We could do some research into housing law and maybe summarize property documentation. And we could plug all this into a single agent so that that human, that employee, the real estate agent, only has one place to go to get all of that, everything that they need. Well, that's really exciting, right? But the reality turns out to be a little bit more challenging, right? The goal here has been to automate some of the work of that human real estate agent, but quickly they're running into trouble. One is that it doesn't quite have the functionality that the team that's supposed to benefit from it actually needs, because that data and AI team under John, they weren't actually in close enough contact with those real estate agents, the human beings, to understand exactly what they needed. So it was a good idea, but was a little bit off. And then they ran into challenges where the data is inaccurate, right? It was confusing different neighborhoods in New York. It was making all sorts of mistakes. And part of that is because it also didn't have persistent connections to their data. We saw in the poll earlier that that's the leading challenge that you're facing today, is how do we connect these things to our data and other systems? And then they were also concerned because it was crashing during their month-end peak. Everyone's trying to close those deals, and they hadn't done the level of testing needed to support that. So it starts to be a real problem, right? And so why is it so problematic? Well, let's again look at what an agent is. An agent is a system of systems, right? It's got LLMs built into it. It's maybe connected to different tools. It's living perhaps under the surface of an application. That application might be more or less developed depending on what we're doing. But some of the challenges are that, of course, hallucinations, which are just part of the reality of working with non-deterministic models like LLMs, they can start to introduce errors, and those errors may not automatically be corrected. And the problem is, if we don't have a way to monitor for that, then we can really start running into challenges with that agent's behavior. And then second, right, those mistakes, once they start feeding on one another and you start connecting additional agents to other agents, that can result in cascades of errors, which can be difficult to understand, difficult to diagnose, and difficult to predict. And so if you end up in a situation where you've created agents in siloed systems, that entire network can become truly ungovernable, right? It's become a chaotic mess for John and their team. So the team goes back to the drawing board, right, to try to figure it out. Let's go to the whiteboard and try to understand what's going on. So they start putting all their different ideas up on the board, and they have plenty of concerns about the stability, about the performance, about the cost, about the governance, about the reporting of how all these agents work. And now, I imagine, right, if you've been working on agents in your organization over the past months or year, I suspect somewhere you have either a physical whiteboard or maybe a virtual whiteboard that probably looks something like this, right? Because this stuff is complicated. These are new systems. We don't have established design paradigms for how to build them. And especially once we start connecting agents together, these systems become very, very complex. But let's break it down, right? I think there's three main common problems that we see. One is the one that, again, you all identified in that poll, the connections to your systems, your enterprise applications, and your data systems. Those are typically quite fragile when you're building out an agent, maybe just using a Python framework, which is not yet fully integrated into your enterprise stack. The second is from that complexity, you end up with really difficult to diagnose failures. And then finally, the accountability, because an agent is really a special type of software, right? It's meant to encode a business process into an entity, the agent, that can automate some part of that business process, right? Well, who ultimately is the owner? Is it the technical team that was actually the one to put those different pieces together to get it to work? Or is it the business team that's, well, actually supposed to be the ones doing that work? Here, we need to have better clarity about all of this. And so what does Dataiku think needs to be the solution to this? Well, Dataiku believes that in order to scale AI agents, which we fundamentally believe ought to be the goal of any organization, you need to maintain control, right? And the opportunity really is now to get this agentic architecture and governance model right. We're still early enough, it's still early days, where you can get this right at the outset without having to accumulate a lot of technical debt that you have to then go back and unwind. And so the first part of that is you need to have an approach which is really an enterprise-first orchestration, such that your agents are built in a platform which is connected to all of your data, all of your models, and to those enterprise applications. The second is you need to have an approach of continuous optimization. Those agents need to be continuously monitored and optimized, much like you would have been doing with your machine learning models through an ML ops practice in the past, or still to this day. And then finally, right, we need to ensure that the creation of all those different agents, even if it's being done by disparate parts of the organization, that that's being done in a single, coherent, governed platform, so that regardless of whoever created that agent and whoever is using it, you have full visibility on what it's doing, how it's performing, what it's costing, what data it's accessing, and so on. And so to take this into more detail, I'm going to hand it over to Christian now, so you can walk us through some of those specific product capabilities.
Awesome. Thank you, Kurt. I'll take it from here to talk about how we actually bring this to life in Dataiku. So as a reminder, Dataiku helps organizations, as we mentioned, create and deploy agents, models, and analytics. But right now, we're focused on agents. So let's zoom into this box a little bit and see what is inside. So if we expand that agents box, we can see primarily that Dataiku approaches agents from two main lenses or capability streams. The ability to create agents, which is there on the bottom, and that's what everybody talks about online all the time, and the ability to control agents, which is maybe less exciting, but actually is where the magic happens to get value out of AI agents. And that's on the top box there. So on the next slide, we're going to see that we'll just zoom into this create agents. And I wanted to just say a few things before we did, which is that, true to Dataiku fashion, we enable the full spectrum of agent builders from computer literate knowledge workers to expert developers. So you could have different groups of people perhaps creating their own agents and their own platforms, but we really don't think this is the best approach for a lot of reasons, but two main ones. One is it's just inefficient. So if you have people building in different platforms, you're going to have a lot of people building similar use cases. You're going to have a lot of reinventing the wheel. It's nice if you can have the building happening mostly in one place because people can reuse components that they solve. Two, and probably more important, is the control and governance of agents is really tough if you're in all these various platforms. So we want to be able to help to standardize the creation of AI agents in a way that meets your compliance standards and your internal requirements, and have a single place where you can observe all of those agents. So with that said, what does it look like? What have we shipped that helps bring this to life? Well, let's talk about agent creation. So as with analytics and with machine learning modeling, Dataiku enables both visual and code-based approaches to creating AI agents. So on the visual side, you basically just define your agent behavior using natural language prompts, and you can point and click to choose which LLMs and which tools your agent will use to carry out its work. You can develop pretty complex AI agents without writing any code with the way that it's set up today in Dataiku. But sometimes you want to use code, and we also enable that with our code agents. You can use popular frameworks like LangChain to tailor and define your agent and tools, and these agents can work together within the platform pretty seamlessly. So this enables a full spectrum of builders. And of course, for agents to do anything useful, they're going to need tools. So Dataiku provides a selection of pre-built tools which can be customized and reused by your other agents. And these would be things like, can I search the web? Can I read and write to a data set? Can I drive a prediction from an ML model or send an alert, an email, a Slack, etc. Or even can I create tickets in my third-party enterprise systems like ServiceNow or Jira? Those tools are in this toolbox. But you can also create your own tools as well using code. So again, true to our fashion, we want to enable full freedom and flexibility of code while also enabling visual focused builders to do a lot of these powerful things as well. And the cool part about doing this in Dataiku is that all of these tools and thus your agents are very deeply connected to all the other aspects of the platform. And so we'll come back to this in the Q&A, but there was a question I was talking about with Lou in the chat around data agents. And this is like a great example because to spin up a data agent, you have to have a lot of connectivity to your trusted data sets. You want to give it the ability to create analyses and dashboards, and then the ability to proactively notify people about what it finds. All of those things are already intrinsic to the Dataiku platform because we support this end-to-end data and AI lifecycle. And so we'll talk about it more in the Q&A, but this is what makes it really exciting to build agents in Dataiku because all of these tools and integrations are at hand already with the unified platform that we've built. So that said, let's talk about controlling agents. There's 3 dimensions that are on the screen here. Orchestration, optimization, and governance. And so we'll just kind of go one by one to talk about what do we mean by each of those things. So first up, enterprise orchestration. So this is about multi-agent models and security and guardrails, making things work together in a scalable and trusted way so that you can actually get value from your agents. And I won't spend too much time on each of these individually, but the important things to call out here are that if you've been following us at all for the last couple of years, you've seen us talk a lot about the LLM mesh. This is basically just a way to centrally manage your LLM access, routing, and security across all the various providers you might use. I saw some people mentioning that they were evaluating Gemini. Maybe you use Gemini, maybe you use OpenAI, Anthropic, local, Hugging Face models, whatever you want to use. LLM Mesh makes it easy to kind of pick the pieces you want. We've done that for our Gen AI applications. Therefore, it's also easy to do for AI agents that you build. You can maintain that optionality. For things like Safeguard, to define guardrails, and for Dataiku to help enforce them, essentially this keeps the agents from going off the rails. Of course, I think we understand this with writing chatbots. It extends to AI agents as well, and maybe even gets a little bit more important as you have agents that will take actions based on what it finds or what it reasons. And so you want to make sure that you can maintain control with the quality of output there. And then something I'm really excited about on this slide is Agent Connect. So this is essentially a single conversational interface for you to orchestrate work across all of your agents and your Gen AI applications like chatbots. So let's say you've developed a couple of chatbots, you develop like 4 or 5 different agents, and you don't really want to go and find each one of those. Number one, after a certain scale, you might forget which one does what. But 2, you might want them to work together, and you don't want to copy and paste output from one to put it in the other. So Agent Connect is a great way to just go into one conversational interface and say, hey, I need to get this job done. And Agent Connect will go and route the work to the appropriate agents or Gen AI applications. And that enables you to do some pretty complex workflows. And because of the control you can have on each of those steps, so either agents or Gen AI chatbots, you can also have a pretty high degree of reliability. It will give you the source and tell you what it does, and you can kind of trace how it gets to the answer and the action that it takes. And it uses your built-in permissions, so you don't have to kind of reinvent that wheel. All right, next up is optimization. I'll talk about these kind of briefly, but essentially the same things, same controls that we put into place with Gen AI chatbots, like cost controls and being able to monitor the quality of output. We've put those in place for AI agents as well. So the cost guard, the one thing I'll call out is imagine you probably have a lot of experimentation, as we saw in our poll earlier. A lot of experimentation is happening with regards to AI agents, but some of these things are going to production. And we maybe don't want to blow our budget on an experimental project because we want to make sure that we can continue running our mission critical AI agents. In this case, you'd want to be able to control budgets differently for different business projects, not just at the connection level. The Coast Guard enables this. So you can basically put proactive budgetary controls and alerts in place by project or connection or user. Being able to do it at the business project level is really useful. On the quality guard side, basically just ensuring reliability by automating evaluations of the LLM outputs. And the new thing that I want to call attention to is Trace Explorer. I mentioned that AI agents, of course, are taking actions versus RAG chatbots, which have just kind of been giving answers. Those actions, you need to be able to audit them, right? You need to be able to see what the agent is doing, not just for like visibility and compliance, but also to actually debug the agent to make better iterations of that agent. And so Trace Explorer is a way to visually explore what the agent did, and you can see where it got stuck and what actions it took, and whether you wanted to take those actions or not. That helps you to tweak the agent for better performance over time. And the last one I'll call out is around governance. On the next slide, so AI agents are governed right alongside your other analytics and models. That's the main thing I want to call out. Some benefits of this are that you can have agent and LLM registries right alongside your model registries. So you can keep visibility across all the agents that are going to be produced within Dataiku, and you can enforce custom approval processes so that agents must go through these sign-offs before they can be deployed. Now, we already do this today for things like ML models, making sure that for business critical applications, things have the proper sign-off to go into production. You don't have to enforce these sign-off approvals on all things, like you might not do it on an experimental agent. But once you get to something that you want to push to production or something that you want to run regularly, and especially if it's mission critical, you want to be able to have a structured way to sign off and approve it. We have that in place today. You can apply it to agents as well. And you can apply consistent frameworks across your agents and monitor the impact of your initiatives with value and risk monitoring. We do this today for our projects, and I think it's going to get even more important as we start investing a lot of time and effort into AI agents. Which ones are very critical? Which ones do we see a lot of value from? Which ones are important for us to govern versus which ones can we kind of be a little bit more lax with? This is a way to kind of map those and track those over time. Makes it easy also to prove the value that you drive with all the work that you're going to be putting into your AI agent initiatives. So that was a kind of a whirlwind tour. We have done some webinars where we've shown some hands-on building of these things. So if you want to go back and look at those, you can. We also have a new AI agent demo up on our YouTube. So have a look at that to see how this actual build happens. And with that said, I wanted to turn it back to Kurt for a moment to wrap us up.
Yeah, thanks, Christian. That's great to get all that detail about what's in the product today. And so, like I said, I'm a storyteller, right? So how would we summarize the story, right? Yeah, you've got your chatbot and you want the short version of the story. Well, we followed a very simple narrative arc, right? First, agents are everywhere, right? Source of some apprehension, maybe some excitement. And then we argued that agents can enable the creation of a new class of enterprise application. That's certainly very exciting, right? Again, this has the potential to change the way which organizations not only do a simple task, but really potentially at scale change the way that they operate. But we saw that can be rather chaotic if it's done in a way which is not coherent and not with the appropriate controls. So now we're here down this trough of disillusionment. And of course, how do we conclude the story? Well, you kind of knew where we're going to land this one from the get-go. But ultimately, right, Dataiku as the universal AI platform enables both the creation and control that's required to build out that future, where you're building that new class of agentic applications on top of that stack of both your data platforms, your AI platforms, your entire, let's say, fleet of analytics and machine learning models, and as well, all of those enterprise applications where so much of your business is taking place. And so we hope that that was helpful for you to understand how Dataiku is approaching this question of agentic application development within the enterprise. Christian, would you like to say a few words about that next webinar that we have coming up?
Yeah, appreciate that. I mean, I think that the next step for most people here is probably like, okay, that's great. I can see how you would approach it, but like, how do I make this real? And oftentimes we need to know like what use cases should I be actually pursuing and how should I vet new ideas? So we're going to talk a little bit about that on the June 5th webinar, which is called Ace Your Use Case. And we'll talk about a framework that you can apply to ideas that you might have to discern which ones should be AI agents and which ones should maybe be something else. And also, we'll give some examples that we've seen that are pretty interesting that are emerging around AI agent use cases. So go ahead and sign up if that's interesting for you.
That's great. Thank you so much, Christian. And with that, I think we are ready to open it up for questions. And I know that we've gotten some questions in the chat. Christian, where do you want us to start?
Yeah, I think that maybe Kurt, I'll kind of go through and I can quarterback some of these. Some of them I'll give to you, and some of them I'll take. Maybe first, do you want to touch on our approach for, of course, this is of interest to everybody, protocols like A2A and MCP? What is our posture and maybe forthcoming approach on those?
Yeah, absolutely. So I answered in the Q&A about A2A that currently Dataiku doesn't support A2A per se. That said, everything gets exposed as an API, and within Dataiku you have the ability to connect agents to one another. Obviously, it's something that we're keeping a close eye on as the market and, let's say, standards evolve. MCP is fully supported within Dataiku now, and so if you want to build an agent using MCP, you can do that directly within the code agent capabilities within Dataiku. It's true we didn't mention it. It is certainly something which is coming out. I think we had the logo on one of the slides. But indeed, this is an important part of the agentic architecture, which is emerging, and therefore is something that we worked to make sure that we support. So as of today, MCP is indeed supported within Dataiku.
Awesome. Yeah, I should have maybe created another poll to say, hey, MCP versus A2A, which one? A lot of folks we're talking to, I think MCP seems to be picking up a lot of steam and is the primary way of interest to pursue this. So I'm always interested to see which way things are going. I have another question for you directly, Kurt.
Sure.
Is Kurt the voice behind Robo Nuggets Instagram page? Are you writing on us?
If I were, would I reveal myself?
Okay,
No,
so
this is my one and only job right here.
okay, awesome. I do want to answer this or talk real quick about this question from Lou. How do we deploy data agents? So that would probably be a webinar of itself, and maybe we will do a webinar on that actually about building a data analytics agent, which I think is a really interesting use case. Hopefully, as you step through what we think is important with regards to challenges to solve with agents and how we're approaching it, hopefully some of this answer has been kind of revealed to you. But to sum it up from my standpoint, the important elements of what you need for a data agent are things like data access and integration, the ability to understand the significance or the context of that data, the tools to not only conduct the analysis, but also to execute or to save it in some way. So that might be dashboards, visualizations, and then ways to alert required stakeholders proactively as to what it finds. And so as I go through those things, you can kind of check off, oh yeah, Dataiku actually has the infrastructure for that already in place. So we're pretty well positioned for use cases like this, because to do all those things manually is going to get kind of messy and difficult and painful. There's a lot of opportunities for things to break. But in Dataiku, those things are already basically there, integrated and embedded. So you put it in an agent, it's actually really easy to say visually, without any code, I can create an agent that is able to read and write to a data set, that's able to find kind of new insights, it's able to run a prediction against an ML model, and then to kind of save what it finds either in rows of a data sheet or just text-based findings, and then to send those findings proactively via email or Slack connections that Dataiku already has. You can also do things like automating how often it should run with scenarios. So all those infrastructure pieces already being in place make it really a lot simpler than it could be to build data analysis agents in Dataiku. And the cool thing is with integrations with things like Snowflake and Databricks, wherever the data lives, you don't have to move it, duplicate it. AI agents that you create in Dataiku can just use that data, work with that data where it lives without moving it around. So all those pieces being in place make it really helpful for a use case like this. And I think that's a good question. I appreciate that question. Let me see. How about this question that came to me directly? Kurt, I'll let you approach this one first. Does Dataiku work with agents from other providers, for example, like Agentforce?
Yes. So the answer to the question is yes. Imagine, right, you're an organization which is using Salesforce as your CRM, and you've subscribed or selected to take on some of their agentic capabilities. One of the great things about agents is that, one way or another, they're all just API-based systems. And so those external agents built outside of Dataiku, living outside of Dataiku, they are accessible as essentially as tools to the agents within Dataiku. And so we're in the process of building out a number of persistent, established connectors to different agentic platforms today. And in the meantime, while we're doing that, it's possible then to just define your own tool within Dataiku with that custom tool capability, allowing you to create a connection to that other agent, such that you can start building out those multi-agent systems that traverse the boundaries of your different enterprise applications. And so you could imagine let's say, an agent that you build within Dataiku, which is then interacting with an agent within your Salesforce environment, passing information back and forth, maybe relying on that external agent to do some of the processes, do some of the steps, complete some of those transactions within the CRM itself. You can imagine a number of different use cases where, for example, you have an analytical agent within Dataiku, which is then reinforcing and enriching the information in the CRM by communicating with that agent, which lives inside of that CRM. So indeed, as always with Dataiku, as it's always been our approach, the focus is on what we sometimes call aggressive agnosticity, right? We want to be aggressively agnostic. We want to go and reach out and make sure that you can connect to everything, so that you have all of that optionality to build out the systems that suit your needs. And truly, as we kind of move into this next era where we have these new applications, these agentic applications, which are no longer constrained to the boundaries of those existing enterprise applications, that you can construct them the way that you see fit. So the answer is yes, Christian. You can definitely connect to those external agents.
Awesome. Appreciate that breakdown. Getting a good deal of questions come through. Really appreciate the engagement from everybody. Let me pick a few to go through. How about this one is asking around how do we use agents created with Dataiku? Can they be exported and used elsewhere like standalone agents? I would say that primarily it's AI agents are meant to be used both within the Dataiku platform, but as you see from the way that we present the platform overall, it is extensible to other applications. So there will be ways, just like we have with models, to kind of expose endpoints and things like that when you're talking about deploying things. You wouldn't like take an agent necessarily and go drop it in some other platform. But as Kurt mentioned earlier, and just to the last question here, there's going to be a lot of opportunity for them to integrate and work together, and we're building for that. So they will run, when you deploy, you can run on pretty much any infrastructure you want. So if you want to keep things on Snowflake or you want to deploy to AWS, just like we've done with our models, you can deploy anywhere, unify them in unified monitoring to keep track of them in Dataiku. So where you deploy them is kind of up to you, but they basically live as objects within Dataiku that can then interact with the rest of your ecosystem. Anything you wanted to add to that, Kurt?
Yeah, the only thing that I would add is to remember that, again, agents are systems of systems. You're going to have different components to an agent. Sure, there's somewhere where that again, kind of the core logic, essentially a string of prompts, which define what that agent does. That has to live somewhere, but that's going to be connected to an LLM. That LLM might be hosted by a third party, by the model developer, or by your cloud provider. Alternatively, I think Christian answered this in one of the written questions. Maybe you're running an on-premises LLM for data privacy concerns, right? So no matter what, right, when you're thinking about that agent, it's not necessarily something that you can just wrap up and send somewhere else, right? Because it is connected to so many different components. Same is true, right? If you're connecting it to your CRM, well, your CRM lives where your CRM lives. And so as we get into this new era of building these agentic applications, which are connecting to other systems, getting the responses back, modifying them, sending them out somewhere else, getting them back, modifying them again, and so on, we're going to have to start thinking about performance, about hosting in slightly different ways because the constraints are indeed different. And so, indeed, yeah, the question of where the agent runs is really going to depend on the agent because different components of that agent are going to run in different places.
Awesome. Good breakdown. We have a few more minutes, so I don't know that we'll get to all the questions, but I'll pick a few more here while we have some time. Here's one around flexibility. So the question is, are the agents being built flexible as with some other point solutions along with integration? So it's hard. I think this question is asking like, hey, is this as easy and flexible as some of these other point solutions that I maybe have been able to use on a free trial basis, but aren't connected to my enterprise systems? And I would say from somebody who's built a handful of visual agents myself as a non-data scientist, I know just enough to be dangerous. Yeah, I'd say it's very flexible. You can pretty much do what you need and want to do with it because of the modular nature of the tools and because of the fact that you can then orchestrate them together with Agent Connect kind of in one place. And each of the tools themselves can be customized using natural language prompts as well. So it gives you a lot of the flexibility that you might experience with code without having to kind of understand all of the inner workings of code to put them all together. Which is, I think, what is attractive about a lot of these point solutions is it opens it up to more people. It's exactly the way that we've built it in Dataiku as well. And Kurt, let me know if there's anything else you'd like to add to that.
No, I think that's a great answer, and where we see Dataiku's real strength is in flexibility in a sense because it does allow you to connect to essentially any of your data sources, any of your enterprise systems that you have, because it's built on top of this existing platform that we've been building out originally for the purposes of data science, machine learning, analytics development, but a lot of that underlying foundation, actually all of that underlying foundation, is directly applicable now to developing and deploying agents. So I would argue that Dataiku is more flexible, and of course, ease of use is a little bit of a matter of personal preference. But certainly, as Christian said, right, with the visual agents capability in Dataiku, there's not a lot of technical expertise which is required to build a good agent. I think I would argue as well, building a good agent, it's not so much a technical challenge. Again, especially with those visual creation tools, it's really a business challenge of understanding what is this business process that we're trying to automate or augment in some way. So I think that's really where your focus ought to be.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, maybe one or two more before we wrap up.
There's one that I see, Christian, if we might take it, because it gets to a really important underlying question. And so the question is, what's the way to prove that the data sources are accurate? And so I'm sorry if this is not a perfect answer, but I think that the challenges for the quality of data for agents are really the same as the challenges of data quality for machine learning work and for analytical work in the past. Data quality in the enterprise, it's an ongoing challenge. And that's ultimately why building agents in a platform that is focused on data quality, on defining golden data sets, on defining data sets which should be used for that, that's ultimately going to be a major benefit for ensuring that the data that an agent is using is the right one, right? It's not just a CSV that got uploaded 3 months ago. It's a vetted data set, perhaps which has been reviewed by the lines of business, perhaps which has been reviewed by your legal team, depending on the use case, to ensure that that is the right agent or that is the right data for that particular agent. Furthermore, right, data quality is never going to be perfect. So you also need the ability to improve data quality, to do data preparation, to change the data, to filter the data, and so on. All of those capabilities are really important to building a quality agent, which is actually based on real, accurate data, trustworthy data. And that's one of the main advantages of a platform like Dataiku, which has all of those capabilities for data connection, data quality management, data quality monitoring, and of course, data preparation, so that it can then be fed to an agent and the end users of that agent can be confident in the results.
Yeah, awesome. That was going to be the one I was looking for, that one. So I appreciate you calling that one out. That's a great question for us to lean into for all the reasons you just mentioned. There's another one that came through that I think I'd like to answer, which is around should we call OpenAI through Dataiku, and how do you monitor like token consumption? We touched on this a bit when we talked about cost guard, but I think there's two pieces that I'd like to call out here with regard to that question. One is yes, on to answer the question directly, yes, you should call OpenAI through Dataiku, whether you're talking about augmented LLMs or RAG chatbots or AI agents. You just select basically existing connections. And that can be to OpenAI, that can be to Anthropic, that can be to anybody. And because of the way that we've instrumented it with CostGuard, you can basically set budgets either to just to notify you when you hit certain amounts, or to like actually shut off access past a certain point. You can do that by project or by connection. And so actually within the system itself, you'll be able to monitor usage and keep yourself from going over budget on token usage. But the other thing I want to call out is that the second half of that is like, how do I actually make it more efficient? How do I make sure that my agents and LLMs are running more efficiently if I can? And so one thing we've had in place for a little while, which is very useful in the case of optimizing agents and chatbot and RAG chatbots, is Prompt Studio. So you can actually compare different types of LLMs and different types of queries against each other, both for quality and for like efficiency in terms of like token cost. And I think it's a pretty useful way to optimize things that you might have that are working, but you're wondering if you can get a little bit more juice out of it. So those two things together, I would say, are pretty powerful when it comes to optimizing for token consumption. Okay, and I think we're almost out of time. We've answered most of the questions. I don't think we're going to be able to get to all of them, so I might go ahead and wrap us up. I'll just give us a call back to the upcoming webinar next week on agent use cases. It should be a pretty good one. So go ahead. I'll leave this QR code up for a second if you want to scan it, and hope to see you all there to talk about really cool agent use cases that are emerging and how to find good use cases for your organization as well. Once again, thank you everybody for joining and for the participation. It was really great. I had a lot of fun. We will send out this recording afterwards, so be on the lookout for that, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Thank you all.